Evening, folks. My name is Brett Taylor. I'm very happy to be here representing the East Port LeBaire Mapping Group. Tonight, over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to take you through a tour of our group, tell you about who they are and why we began it. We're going to take you on a tour of the project as well. This was a truly community-based grassroots project. It grew from the ground of our peninsula. The individuals who were involved had very varied backgrounds, from people who could trace their family trees back to the late 1700s with the arrival of the Loyalists, to those people like ourselves, Barb and I, who have moved there only in the last few years and live there only part-time. So it involved a collaboration with one of the premier technological institutes of the province, the Centre of Geographic Sciences. And it involved the use of students and a lot of tromping through woods. And so we're going to take you through some of that tonight. At the end of the talk, I'll be opening up the map so that you have a chance to see how it looks when it's not in static form as it is on this slide deck. And then we'll let the conversation go where it may. And there are so many things I won't be able to talk about. The question and answer period at the end will be for you to tell us which of those you want us to hear about, whether it's privacy issues or issues surrounding the use of non-traditional sources, or whether it's about how to construct such a group for yourselves. Or maybe what might happen is that I put you all to sleep and the conversation will just go home to bed. Sort of see how that works. So the primary driver for this project was to not lose the memories of our community, to try and keep abreast of the knowledge that is lost with each passing and each elder becoming unable to speak about it. In order to do this, you have to have at least one person. As it turns out, we have a whole bunch of people who are obsessive and curious. One of the first of these, Dirk van Loon, was one of the first of several to get involved with this project and push it forward. We're going to do a hybrid presentation tonight, and you've heard us scampering around trying to make all of this work. Thanks so much to Tim for making it work. We have people on Zoom listening to us now and hopefully participating later. We didn't know how well this was going to work, and so we pre-recorded excerpts of our individuals speaking just in case the technology didn't work. And once we did, many of them wanted to just keep it that way. So Dirk is going to join us here through a pre-recorded clip. Here's hoping this works.
Thanks to the Royal Nova Scotia Historical Society for inviting us to put on this presentation of the work we've been doing here in East Port LeBaire since 22. I didn't realize it was that long. Anyway, I am really a comfortable way, having lived here only 50-some years. However, I think that I was probably one of the first people in a long while to have moved in here from away and decided to stay here full time. Almost everybody else who came would be here for the summer. It wasn't long before when we bought a home in what's called Sandy Bay. And one of the first things that we ever wondered about was, well, when was this house built? Well, nobody knew. Nobody had an idea about so many things. I know when I'd ask directions of how to get to the post office, somebody'd say, well, you go up here and you go straight at Bill's Turn. Forever today I knew about Bill's Turn. I knew the fork in the road. I had no idea why it was called Bill's Turn. And that's one of the things that kind of encouraged the idea of getting together and seeing if we couldn't put together a history of this place. Oftentimes we'd have a question about something
and we should have asked so-and-so.
gosh, you know, he died about 3 years ago. We should have asked him. Here, oftentimes people say about, Halifax or any big city somewhere. Oh, a lot of history, a lot of history. And if we don't have any history, well, we've got a history. And so it's really interesting when we got together, three of us, back in 22, talking to Marshall Burgess, who was born here. Something that we should have asked so-and-so. Gosh, you know, he died about 3 years ago. We should have asked him. Here, oftentimes people say about Halifax or any big city somewhere. Oh, a lot of history, a lot of history. And if we don't have any history, well, we've got a history. And so it's really interesting when we got together, three of us, back in 22, talking to Marshall Burgess, who was born here, and Danielle Robertson, who was born not far from here and who's done a history, worked on history of the area for the Thomas Hall Park. We got together and said, well, what about doing something like this? We had no idea where it was going to go. And I certainly didn't have any that we were going to be able to get into new technology. And with the help of COGS in Lawrencetown, David McLean and students there, the whole idea of this history has expanded
Hopefully,
greatly.
Dirk is hearing his words echoed back to him down in
like to help other people too.
Port Mattoon right now, where the rest of our group is gathered with their version of Tim.
Their village,
split into two individuals
their
at
corner of the world.
Trying to keep
because it's one of the people who joined
audible. Hopefully they'll be able to
on,
participate in the question and answer later.
Shortly after getting involved.
So you need somebody to ask questions, but you also need
fun.
people who have deep
So thank you very much.
In order to answer some of those questions. It's fine for those of us who don't know this stuff to be able to dig around on the internet and seek answers and seek documents. But the real stories come from the stories that have been passed down by oral traditions and not well documented. We need individuals within the community who know the community. One of those individuals is sitting up at the front right now, Marshall Burgess. Marshall has a family tree that's extensive in the area, a family tree that has supplied many prominent citizens, many contributions to the war, to two world wars. He's a retired lawyer and a noted artist and a good friend. And I'm going to cede the floor to him for a few minutes to tell us a little bit about the community itself. Would you like should he be holding the, wherever it went, mic? Thanks. There you go.
Thank you very much for the invitation to come here tonight to talk to you about the little community. I was born in Port LaBear. The Burgess family have been there for a long time. And anyway, my family have lived there, and I have a summer place where I was, my home where I was born in Port LaBear in 1952. We had no running water, we had no electricity, and my dad, he was a lobster fisherman. My mother was a school teacher. My father wanted me to be a lobster fisherman. But Mama said, no, we're going to go to Hunts Point and go to school there. And I followed her advice and then went to law school and became a lawyer. But anyway, I tried to get down to my cottage in Port LaBear. I mean, it is paradise to go there. It's an absolutely beautiful little community. And this project here, I remember Dirk coming to my house with a proposal, well, we should do something to get the history of this little community. And we meet all these people that are going to be talking here. I met a lot of people through this project, and Brett and Barbara here were just into the technology of how to make this thing work. So it was very good to meet with them. And over the past 2-3 years, we put this project together. My family, there was 2 government wharfs in Port LaBear, and my family were in the fishing business. My grandfather had a cannery there. A lot of people were in the cannery business. They used to can lobsters. My family got canned clams. berries, rabbits, whatever, and that's how they made their living and stuff. There's always lots of, you may not have had electricity, you may not have had running water, but there was lots of fish around there, and people were involved in the herring business and the lobster business, and there's still a lot of people, there's 15, 16 boats going lobster fishing now in Port La Bear. So that's kept this place going over the years there. And my family, my grandmother, she was from Iceland, and she met Burgess. He was a fish dealer in Port Joli, and they made their home in Port La Bear, had 7 children, and they've been very involved with the community. One of the things in this project here, the land where the school was built in Port La Bear came from the Burgess family, and the church that's there, still standing there, that came from the Burgess family. So in the Barb and Brett here over the years have tracked down all the teachers who ever taught school in Port La Bear, all the ministers who ever preached in that church in Port La Bear. And I don't think there's any community that's well documented as this project right here. And it was a real pleasure and honor to work with it. Thank you.
Thank you. When Marsh says Barb and Brett, you should really hear everybody in the group, because Barb and Brett put a lot of the stuff up on the web and made it searchable and available, as you'll hear when we go through the group. But the amount of work done by each individual in this group is astounding. This is a volunteer, community-based grassroots project that just has been much more successful and much more involved than any of us thought. So it's nice to have people who know the community and can answer the community, and we have several of those in the group. It's also nice to have somebody who knows a little bit about history. Danielle Robertson is somebody who has been involved in the history of our area for quite some time. As she'll tell you herself, she has deep family roots in the region. And she and Marsh and Kathy and Dirk were probably the people that pushed this forward before the rest of us knew that it was even happening. I'll let you hear her story here on this clip.
Hi, my name is Danielle Robertson. I'm a 7th generation Loyalist descendant in the area, and I think my husband is 6th generation Loyalist descendant. Our forefathers were among the first permanent settlers in the community of Port Mattoon, which is nearby, and the community of Port Joli, which is just up the road. So we're not come from a ways. And I've been interested in history since I was in Port Mattoon School. It bothered me in later years that we never learned local history like we should have. My very first forefather and the kids I was sitting next to were actually in the same regiment in the 1700s, but we never learned that, unfortunately. But I loved history since I was a kid, really. And I did go to Mount St. Vincent University in Halifax and obtained a history degree in the late 80s. And I got my dream job around 1990 with Thomas Riddell Park being just being created at that time. And they wanted somebody to do the human history at Thomas Riddell Park. So I thought I'd died and gone to heaven because I was getting paid well and doing what I loved. So I was really excited to find that there were people that were interested in the same thing that I was interested in finally. So it's interesting how I call myself an on-the-ground historian because I'm always looking for features, cellars, native encampments, all kinds of things that you can find on the ground that relate to the history. So how I did a lot of my research initially was I started out with Crown grant maps and found where the original settlers' grants were. Then luckily we have a 1787 census here in this area, thanks to Cindy Perkins.
With that early census, I was able to determine how many of the land grantees actually stayed in our area, because as you may know, a lot of the loyalists came here thinking they would be fine, due to the rocky soil and climate. They realized that in order to survive here, they had to become hunters and fishermen. So a lot of the early settlers, land grantees, left. But a few of them did stay, and they did show up in 1787 census. So we take the land, I took the land grantee maps, then I took the census, and then I formed my brain and find the sellers. There were sellers right by the shore, because there were no roads, everything was by the so I'm totally obsessed with the roads. But this group is great because the idea was to talk together someone like me who's not technological.
But this group is great because what it did was it brought together someone like me who's not technological. I could feed all the information people wanted through my interviews and my research that I've done.
So there were people in the group that were really good at that. But what's interesting is that we all bring something different, and what others may not have, I have.
I could feed all kinds of information, but to organize it and to make it into technological format that
I have no idea how
challenging
challenging it is for people to speak to a camera.
that were really good at that.
It took a lot of courage and practice.
What others may not have, I have.
So okay, so now you've got people ask questions, people who know the area, people who know a little bit about the domain. What else do you need? Well, this project started out on a flip chart. It had a map and a stand and different plastic layers on it, showing where people lived and where buildings were. And that became rapidly not very doable. And so what we needed was we needed to move to technology. And this move happened at about the same time that Barb and B and others joined the group. But it was a transitional move, a transformative move into what you're about to see tonight. And one way that this happened was because of a very fortuitous connection that Dirk made with David McLean at the Centre of Geographic Sciences. David's been tremendously helpful. He's not just a contact. He is a tutor when I was trying to learn how to edit this map. He was a provider of student workhorses when we desperately needed them. He was a cheerleader who came out and helped us present when we presented to the community. It's just been a really wonderful addition to the team. And this is his few moments.
Having Molly and Cody each use their project topic time to help out the East Port Libert community group with their mapping project was an excellent opportunity for technical how-to by them, wonderful chance for them to deal with clients and provide wonderful results. Hi, I'm Dave McLean, one of the faculty here teaching GIS, Geographic Information Systems, at the Centre of Geographic Sciences, part of the Nova Scotia Community College in Lawrencetown, Nova Scotia. Our students in this one-year program have the opportunity to work on a project. It comes up at the end of the year, and it's an opportunity for those students to apply principles and technicalities of their geomatics-related topics and their areas of interest. Imagine my delight in October of 2022 in receiving an email from Dirk with the phrase, "We'd like to deal with all manners of information about this peninsula." It's so map-ish. So in the background, supporting this story map that you see as eplhstory.ca are over 20 data layers, and they're set up and customized by these two students and since by members of the community group to present layers and information and that overall application that you work with. This can be seen on just about any device. So this is a wonderful demonstration of connecting industry, NGOs, government groups, and community groups towards student projects. These are really win-win-win, and we're really happy to be part of this EPLH story.
Dave, I saw that you signed into the room, Dave, and I want you to know that I noticed every single map you deliberately placed in the background. At one point when Dave was introducing me to how to edit this, I'm a informatician, I know database as well, and I told him frankly that I saw a very, very interesting database covered by this really uninteresting thing called a map, and I'm not sure he's ever forgiven me. This is the structure of our site. This is basically taken directly from the headers that let you link to other pieces of information below. We put a lot into this, a lot more than I think any of us anticipated when we first started. And this doesn't even take into account the maps that we then attached and geolinked these findings to. We started, but the focus of our information is necessarily based on those individuals that we could find on the peninsula, and that does limit us a little bit, but we try hard to involve information from before settlers arrived all the way through to the early settlers themselves, and in fact into the mid-20th century. We had a hell of a time figuring out where Port La Bear was on old maps, because it is named so many different ways. Port Ors, in other words, Port of Bears, Bear Point, Port of Bears, Bear Port, and finally, in the mid-1800s, Port Hebert. Port La Bear apparently came along sometime later. We're not just exactly sure when. A.F. Church maps in the late 1800s, as many of you will know, or many of you may know, A.F. Church was a cartographer that did the counties of Nova Scotia in the late 1800s. He found us on his maps, and at this point we are noted as Port La Bear. So perhaps it was A.F. Church. The land grant maps that Danielle references were an interesting basis to start, and we asked our first student, Molly, to go back to create a toggle that would allow us to show both the original land grantees and the current day markings for ownership, so that it would be possible to see how things had changed over time. We used local information, in part from a gentleman named Jim Himmelman, who drew us a map from memory of where people lived and what institutions were around, to geolink information about individual locations and place names. So for example, this is Bill's Point, and it's the same bill as Bill's Turn, and it's also the same bill as Bill's pasture. Thank you, I was going to say backyard. And you can see that this was named after William MacDonald, who was around in the early 1800s. He was married his wife Sarah, and he was a fisherman, and he may well have been a ferryman for the ferry for East Port La Bear across to the west side. You also need people who have a passion for finding out about the people in the community. VMAO has a long-standing history with this community, familial and social, and true curiosity about where people lived and who they were. And they allowed us to put a human component to the map This is B's commentary.
I grew up in East Port La Hebert, better known as Port La Bear. My family's been here for about 70 years. The community was our playground, where we discovered old foundations and cemeteries and often wondered who these people were. I came across a beautiful old stone with an iron fence around it, and I wondered who this belonged to. So I went home with a little bit of Googling. I found out that he was our very first lighthouse keeper. And this is when history started to come alive. Then I got a poster in the mail asking if anybody was interested in joining this little group to find out more about the history of Port La Bear. And I got very excited. I figured, hey, such a small community, this is not going to take very long. But here we are 3 years later, and we're still finding new history. I wasn't sure how we were going to achieve this until I was introduced with the Nova Scotia Archives and Census. I went to the library in Liverpool, and I read every book that had connections with Port La Bear, including Simon Perkins' diaries, which he wrote about connections with Liverpool. One of the first projects was transcribing an old writing book that was used as a journal that Dirk has, that belonged to the Stewart family who lived out on Stewart's Point. They wrote about wood chopping parties, having get-togethers, going to dances at other communities, and visitors as far away as Boston, shipwrecks and their crews. I have an Old Testament with an inscription. It says, "A gift of a friend, Henry Stewart," his book, April 30th, 1867, that belonged to the same Stewart family. This is when history started to become fun. When I was in school, I didn't like history. This is so different. We're connecting people that we knew and know today. And I wanted to know more about the people who lived here and what life was like for them. With help, I went to all the cemeteries in our community. Some were easy to find, while others were a challenge. One in particular was found using my memories from when I was young. After traipsing through the woods, using an old road that was no longer visible, with my hiking group giving up, I had to check one more spot, where I found an old wire that surrounded the cemetery. With some digging, we dug up one double stone. After talking with some people and my memories, I do believe there's another stone yet to be uncovered. Now we had to figure out who was buried in these cemeteries. At another cemetery, there are 2 stones, and many graves that have only head and foot markers. I found out who these graves belong to by going through death records. It's heartbreaking to see so many premature babies and young people who died from tuberculosis, pneumonia, and illnesses that are curable today. The first settlers were the McDonalds. Their family tree was already done, so we concentrated on the other families. Barb and I transfer all these families' information using Family Echo, a website Brett got permission for us to use for our project. At one point, we had a very long table covered with printouts of just one family. We found out who were these people, where they lived, mapped out where the houses were located, and added pictures. Some of the houses are still standing, others are just photos and memories. I'm going out in the community and collecting pictures, stories, and interviews. So many stories that have been told, and so many more waiting to be discovered.
The homes that B and Barb and others have identified and found, we mapped onto the GIS product, and then put pop-ups on it so that you could find out, if you clicked on them, where they would be. We had some privacy issues surrounding this. We had to be cautious about how late in the 20th century we permitted this information to come up, because there's opportunities for scammers to hit public sites like this and to affect vulnerable people. We also did the same thing with historical business, etc., which I think probably could be renamed as historical institutions, because we included in these the church and the school and other places. We put each of these onto the map and then arranged it so that the pop-ups would provide us with pictures or stories or details about how these institutions came to be. In this case, we see Mary Lisk contributing towards the school. You see the school picture as it is today. And we included where we could documents and other artifacts that we found, digital artifacts that we found that were related to this. So in this case, the half-year school marks for the individuals in the 1920s we could find from the local newspaper. So Barb's sitting up here, but she did the video with us and decided it would be just fine if I just played the video. So that's what we're going to do. Barb Hill-Taylor is my partner in crime and my partner in life. And she has a pretty full CV, having done everything from fine art to publishing to teaching to pharmacy to research pharmacy. And now to, it was her master's in information management that led her to this group, that and her innate and insatiable curiosity. This is her story.
Hi, I'm Barb Hill-Taylor, and I joined the project in about 2022. We had bought some property on East Port LeBaire Peninsula in 2012 and had not really had the time to get to know our neighbors, so this was a really good opportunity for me. I went to the meeting and thought, this might be a little bit dry, but it wasn't. It was giggling and gossip and really good food, and so I kept coming to these meetings. And I've learned a lot from this experience. With the help of Joanne and Bea and Danielle, I learned how to look at census data. I learned how to build a family tree, and spent a lot of time trekking around on the peninsula looking for graves and foundations, and that was a lot of fun. So this has been a really good experience. I was able to help the project in the way that I could use spreadsheets and I could organize data and collect files and make them available, sortable and findable in the computer. So that was helpful. I also was interested in helping with the research, especially shipwrecks. That was fun because coming from Saskatchewan, there's no shipwrecks to speak of. And I also recently got involved in documenting the veterans' history of our peninsula, and I found that very interesting. Thank you for letting us present our project. It's been a lot of fun, and it's been a great experience. Hi.
Disaster. All right. So the gravestones that have been referenced a couple of times here, as you probably know, for much of the previous century, the 1800s, and certainly into the 1700s, people were buried in the backyards of the houses in which they died. There was not a lot of medical involvement for many of them. We know of at least half a dozen known grave sites, but having a gravestone made for you required a certain amount of wealth. Many individuals simply had a stone that they knew where it was, and any wooden component that might have identified people, in many cases, are long since gone. So Barb and Bea and others in the group got together and identified these, and then started to put together a list of who was interned in the site. And so if you click on one of these, this was the one in the MacDonald family, up pops the pop-up, and it'll give you a list which you can scroll through that will give you the list of those individuals who are known to be interred there. We were very rigorous about trying to make sure we didn't put the wrong people in the wrong grave sites, and this was sometimes quite difficult. If you click on a link that's below that pop-up, you'll get a dynamic family tree. This is static, of course, because it's on a slide deck, but the dynamic family tree means you can search for individuals within it. You can move it around and find where the connections are. I mentioned that we had a collaboration with COGS. This was a collaboration with an unnamed person on the internet who eventually became identified as Gideon in in Israel, I believe. And he was incredibly helpful. The kindness of people you approach to help with projects like this. If you can interest them, it's amazing how much they will give you. This individual gave me help. It was not a trivial matter to make these pop up on the click of a button. And this individual gave me a great deal of help with the programming and the scripting. We went back and forth with innumerable messages, and then we asked for his permission to use it for our group and received permission in minutes after the sending. This is an example of the sort of census data that others scan through. I tried to, but honestly, this is not my strength. These are handwritten, oftentimes difficult to read, quasi-searchable, I would say at best. Certainly not digital in any meaningful way. And from this, you could pull out people who probably had the right names and the right, and then you track them down and find out if the birth dates matched and if their cohort and their household matched. And eventually you could get to the point where you're reasonably comfortable that these folks actually belonged in the house in which you'd assigned them, or the grave. The shipwrecks Barb mentioned, there are at least 32 known shipwrecks in our immediate area. For any of you who might be archaeologists, these are only approximate locations. We have not given accurate locations, A, because we often can't find them, and B, because we want to leave the sites undisturbed unless they go through the appropriate channels. But if you click on this, you'll pop up a little pop-up that will tell you the date of the sinking, whatever we know about the ship itself in terms of its build and its contents and its location, and whatever we know about the accident itself. Barb referenced the veterans that we have been able to track down for November 11th. We have a What's New section at the top of our site, and for November, obviously, we chose veterans, and these are relatives of the gentleman sitting up here beside us at the top from the Burgess family. There were, I think, 4 Burgess ancestors who went to 2 separate world wars from our area. This is my favorite part of the whole thing, because this is local voices. Local voices is not geotagged. Local voices is just a collection of interviews, many of them done, well, all of the interviews have been done by B. Mayo, but also written stories from relatives about people who lived here. And as much as possible, these are in the voices and the tongues, the manner of speaking of the individuals we received. And I found this told me more about what the last, generation or so of life on this peninsula has been like than anything else that we took. Kathy Lawson was one of the original 4 for this group. Unfortunately, we were unable to get a video of her. Circumstances prevented us from obtaining a video to showcase her. But she is one of the individuals who contributed to the local voices. She is a direct descendant of Alexander MacDonald. I was going to say Mackenzie, Jesus Christ. Alexander MacDonald, one of the first settlers on Sandy Bay, the first settler on Sandy Bay. And she wrote a story about her grandfather, John, and her grandmother, Grace, who were in the area from the late 1800s until the middle of the 20th century. And for example, she talks about meal times where 15 people lived in the house, and one time 25 people came for lunch and 26 people stayed for supper, and the girls had to do the dishes 3 times over before everybody got fed, and the children were left wondering if there was going to be anything left for them, and how John would pick the people up with the boat and bring them in the morning on Sundays and take them home at night in the evenings. And this is the sort of story when Dirk says we have a history, when we say that we want to maintain our community because of its memes and its stories. These are the sorts of stories that tell you what life was really like. Joanne Mitchell is our editor-in-chief. She is a very careful, very thorough editor, very careful, very thorough writer. And she provides us with all sorts of support in other areas, but most notably her capacity to correct and fix and give us some sort of continuity. You've got to appreciate how difficult it is when you have 6 people writing for a project, all of us having different writing styles to begin with, how easy it is for us to get way off base in any sort of standard. This is her clip.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Joanne Mitchell. My husband and I moved to East Port-la-Bear from the Ottawa area in April 2023. When I was invited to join the Community Map Project in January 2024, I wasn't sure what I could contribute, as I neither knew the history of the community nor felt qualified to research any particular topic. But I thought it would be fun to get to know this group of active, enthusiastic, and intelligent neighbors, so I went. What I have been able to do is use my writing, editing, and proofreading skills to help other members craft their stories and to work towards a reasonable level of consistency in style and terminology on the website, while preserving the author's voices and the language used in source documentation. You have no idea how many ways there are of spelling East Port-la-Bear. I keep notes on the decisions that we make about styles, for example, book titles being written in italics with no quotation marks. And right now I'm trying to figure out the style for ship names such as HMCS Algonquin. When I review the information on the website, not knowing the history of the area and not being from the Maritimes helps me spot omissions that might confuse our national and international visitors or ideas that could be clarified for their better understanding. Instead of taking on a research project, I have investigated small pieces of information to support the others' research, such as suggesting the use of the website Family Echo to display family trees, which Bee, Barb, and Brett have used to great advantage. In return for my time, I have learned about the social and economic history of my neighborhood, been kept informed of current events in the community, drunk coffee and eaten delicious snacks, and made some new friends. I hope you enjoy our website as much as I do. And please let us know if you find any typos.
So I'm the last one to introduce myself. Okay, so I am retired. I'm Barb's spouse, and that's mostly what you need to know. I was not really involved in this. I was sitting on the end of the couch listening to Barb talk about how interesting this was for a year or two. And then our second student finished, and we realized that we needed someone who could edit GIS. And I'm not technophobic. I'm not a particular fan of GIS, but I'm not technophobic. And so I ended up with the task. I don't think there's anybody in the room that's still single, but if you are, the message to take away from this is not to pursue lovely, intelligent, interesting partners, particularly if they associate with interesting, intelligent people on interesting, addictive projects. It may take a while to spring, but trust me, it's a trap. Thank you to Coastal Queens and Jordan and Heather for helping us get this out to our people. We had a whole ton of contributors, and I'll just highlight Molly and Gemini and Cody Penny, the COGS students who set the basis for this entire project to work, without whom it would simply not exist, and David for providing us the connection to them. Our URL sometimes confuses people, okay? It's simple, it's eplhstory.ca, but what it isn't, it is not eplhistory.ca, it's not eplhhistory.ca, it's eplhhistory.ca, eplhstory.ca, EPLH for East Port-la-Bear, and story because this is a story we think we found for this beautiful place. Thanks for your time. And if you have questions, we're happy to entertain them.